Welcome. Welcome, everybody, to the show. All right, I've got a special guest in the background. I'm going to bring him on in a little bit, but I wanted to talk a little bit about. Mark, can you check real quick for me that I'm live on YouTube?
Yes, you are. You're good.
All right,
You're
beautiful.
going.
Beautiful. I wanted to. We're going to go over three things today. We're going to talk about the SPY, okay? And there's obviously a huge interest in shorting the SPY at these levels. The very last video that I did, I talked about how every time we've gotten above 22 to 23% in price action away from the moving averages, the weekly EMA, we've seen a reversal every single time. And right now we're 24%. So we're kind of creeping even further away from the moving averages. Those work as magnets. Price absolutely will come back to the moving average. It's just a matter of when, okay? And so before you decide to load up on inverse plays or puts this fine afternoon, I want to warn you that even though I do believe that we are getting very close to a reversal, if you take a look at what Wall Street is doing with their money, the fact is they're not yet beginning to hedge. So they're not buying puts to hedge their long positions yet. Matter of fact, institutions were rapidly selling puts last week. And when they sell puts rather than buy them, it's because they believe that those puts are going to expire worthless in the next couple of weeks. And so they're profiting on the impending bearishness that people are imagining is directly ahead of us. And so right now, the market has not cracked. In today's video, I'm going to give you a line that would indicate when the up move is on hold and when it's officially broken, right? So we've got to break it up into a couple important strategic lines because obviously we have to accommodate for volatility, but there is a price point in my mind that if we close a daily candle below will absolutely mean that we have reversed officially. Now I want to take that conversation and I'm going to flow into some Bitcoin when I bring my special guest on, and I'm going to kind of do the same thing there. We're gonna talk about where Bitcoin's going. I'm gonna give you where the up move that we consolidated and we're slowly holding this ground and possibly moving a little higher. But I'm gonna give you the point in which that up hold could go on hold. And then I'm gonna give you the line in which it could be utterly and completely lost. And then I'm gonna give you something I haven't given you, which is my ideal buy zone for Bitcoin. And I'm gonna reveal exactly what my get rich personal Bitcoin strategy is right now. How am I positioning my money personally for explosive gains in the years ahead? I'm going to lay that out for you guys today. And I'm going to discuss one more stock that you should be looking at in 2026 that's got some very interesting news surrounding it right now. And they've got the same thing going on with this stock as I just kind of highlighted on the SPY, which is I'm going to be looking at the question, how are rich folks, Wall Street, institutional investment firms positioning themselves right now on this particular company? And what does that tell us? Should we buy as well for 2026? So we're going to deep dive a stock. And then I'm going to get my special guest to give me his hot plays that he's looking at right now. I would like to formally welcome you to Wall Street. This is the Stocks with Josh show. I hope you've had a beautiful Christmas week going. I've had a nice time, and today is a work day. We made some money in the Stocks with Josh Discord. We traded a couple plays and had on one of them, I wasn't even expecting a big gain. I was just tagging along one of Mike's plays on shorts on Google, and that small position went up 100%. So that was a nice, beautiful play, and we made a fair amount of money riding NVIDIA up this morning. We got a fat 50% on that. A lot of opportunity there. I had some great comments. If you don't know what I'm talking about my pro trading community called Stocks with Josh or ChartGoat University. You can get in there and you can learn. There's a lot of folks that aren't actively trading or putting money to risk. They're paper trading, and they're showing up to these daily trade sessions that we've got. We've got a total of 10 weekly live trading sessions, and they're just learning. And some of them are practicing with a paper trading account, and others are finally at the stage where they're putting real money at risk, and they're seeing some great gains. Of course, I've got some pros in there. I got people that are showing wins of up to $5,000 or more during our live trade session today. But you got to lay your foundation before you can begin to hit those home runs. But we have fun and we make money. Come check us out. It's the name of the show, is the name of the website. You go to www.stockswithjosh.com. Let's talk briefly. Before I bring my special guest on, he's in the background, I'm going to talk about the move of the call wall. Now, we've been seeing the call wall bounce around between
Hey, Josh,
680.
just very quickly, I'm getting a bunch of messages that people can't get onto the stream.
Why do you think
They
that
can't
is?
get on. I'm not sure.
All right, let me go check it out.
But yeah, I'm getting a bunch of people saying they can't join the stream.
Give me a second.
So I just want to make sure that there's not something there on that end, because the amount of people viewing seems
Yeah, it seemed very low. That's why I was asking.
Yeah, so
Okay, so it
some
should
people
be
are able to get
public
in, but
now.
other
Everybody
people
should be able to join now. We had a great intro. We covered a lot in the first few minutes. If you guys want
And
to
thanks
figure
for
that
joining
out.
in. Have a great day, everybody.
Yeah, now I'm seeing, hey, hit the like for me real quick, just so I can see who's all in the house right now. Appreciate you guys. I think it should be good to go, but drop a heart and hit the like and let me know if everybody is getting the stream. For a moment there, it looked as if folks were not getting the stream. There's the burst of likes I come to love to see. Blessings to you guys. All right. I'm going to, I don't know what's going to have been recorded by what I've already said, but let me just run you through one quick minute of what I've said. The bottom line is the SPY absolutely looks poised to roll over. However, you've got to follow the money. And when you go to look at the call wall, which is something I've been teaching about, I get that information from Cheddar Flow. When you look at the call wall, it's where the majority of options is essentially sitting. There's about $5 to $6 billion worth of a call wall on the SPY right now. And what that does is it works as a magnet, and it also works as an area where price gets pinned. Now, what you watch for if the market's going to continue higher is you want to see that call wall continuously get moved out a little bit. And what you don't want to see is for it to drop right beneath the current price. We've been constantly pushing higher. The call wall got pushed up today. Normally it jumps by around $5 or so in $5 increments. Today it jumped from 690 to 692, and it didn't fully move. A lot of folks stayed camped at 690, and then some of that money, billions of dollars, moved to 692. So we are still trending higher. The other thing that I talked about in my last video is that Wall Street didn't show up to panic hedge their stock portfolios by buying puts. They actually showed up last week, and even this week, they're still doing it. They're selling puts, right? And the goal there is to collect those fat premiums for folks who think the market is going down tomorrow. They're selling them puts just to collect that premium because they believe, no, it's not going down tomorrow. So I want to highlight as we talk about any bearishness that you hear in this video, I just want you to be understood that it is not triggered yet. And the purpose of this video is to give you some triggers as to when to know for certain a confirmed breakdown has occurred. I'm going to give you the move up is on hold level. And then beneath that, I'm going to give you, it's really broken down level. Okay. And we're going to do that for the SPY and for Bitcoin. And I'm going to give you some talk on a stock that I think has some interesting, noteworthy news. As specifically, we got some billionaires and we've got some sharks and whales beginning to nibble on this stock. It's an extreme underdog story that's worth paying attention to. And I'm going to share an exact leap option that's being stealthily bought in the tune of millions of dollars on this stock. And, when you start seeing money positioned in advance, it sometimes makes you feel like somebody knows something. And I'm going to go through the technicals on that one as well. Welcome to Wall Street. This is the Stocks with Josh show. Let me bring my man Mark on the show. Welcome to the show, Mark. I appreciate you being here.
Hey, Josh, thanks for having me on. Merry Christmas and Merry Christmas, everybody. I hope everybody had a wonderful and blessed time with family and friends, and great to be here the day following and just enjoying the festive cheer.
Thank you, Mark. Mark, you have been, Mark is a crown trader in the Stocks with Josh Discord, and he has been just killing it with some alerts. I'll give you a moment to highlight some of your favorite positions right now. I know that you deserve to be acknowledged for your palladium call on the backs of gold and silver. I still think silver's going higher. It seems to me that it's manifest destiny that it'll possibly get to $100. I'm curious your thoughts on the metals space, and if is any of that money when that cools off, is any of that money going to roll over into Bitcoin? How far down the road do you think that'll be, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's definitely overcooked at the moment, and it's been on a parabolic run. It's outperformed the crypto market in 2025. And I think that surprised everybody. That certainly surprised me. Let's just be honest. I'm not sure many people picked that gold and silver would outperform crypto and your
No.
altcoins. However, that was only up until it was really since October 10th when we went into a bear market there. And but if you really took the whole year, yes, that's true. But remember, crypto can drop fairly quickly. So I would expect some of that money to rotate into the crypto market. But I think people are biding their time, and I think wisely so. I'm certainly biding my time because everything is playing out exactly as it has every other time. And if that continues to play out, we've got this 100 EMA weekly moving average, Joss, which just happens to have 1 million Bitcoin transacted at that key 85K level. That's a strong, strong level. And you can see there's a bit of a bear flag forming there as well on the weekly time frame, which if it does play out, before we have a little bit of a relief rally, because we haven't had one since the top on October 6th, there hasn't really been any kind of a bounce, any kind of relief. And I think that's what people are waiting for, number one, to ride a little bit of a relief rally. That's generally gone to the 200-day moving average. So we could go from 85K up to around 105, 106K, which is where I estimate the 200-day moving average will be. It's at 107 right now. And then usually we capitulate down to the 200-week moving average, sitting in the 50s at the moment, although that may be in the 60s there. But if we were just to do something a little bit different and capitulate from here, and that bear flag was to play out, that does take us straight down into the 50s, low 60s, 50s area. And so that's, I think, something I'm looking for. I think for me, short from 85K, a loss of that level. And I think the key levels up above is between 90 and 93. It's really been trading between 85 and 90 at the moment, but 93 is that key level. I think if we can get above there, then we might get that nice relief rally. And I think a lot of people are needing some relief in the crypto space. And, I think we're needing some kind of positivity, because it just hasn't been that good for the last 2 months, and it's just been all down, lots of liquidations, and we're just waiting for that. But for me, for long term, I mean, that's just from a trader's mindset. People have been asking me, hey, when I'm going to start accumulating Bitcoin. I know your strategy is a little bit different with just, you've got that dollar, and that's a great strategy, by the way. Just buy a little Bitcoin every day, or buy a little Bitcoin every week or each month. Just put it on a timer. You kind of set and forget it. And historically, you're always going to be good every few years. That's going to give a great return. Or you can wait for those more extreme dips around the bottom of the bear market, which usually happens around 500 days before the next halving. But that's a long time away. That's October 2026. So I'm looking at the 200-week moving averages as my first signal and sign of potential accumulation. But I'll continue to trade it both up and down, long and short, until I feel that we get some kind of bottom. And we had a real black swan event yet, Josh?
No. Curious your thoughts on update regarding strategy.
Yeah, well, the decision on January the 15th is going to determine whether the MCSI indexes get delisted. And that's a
Break it
possible black
down
swan
for
event.
folks who maybe are not as up to date with the news. Give it a real elementary explanation, like you're explaining it to your young son.
Okay. We'd probably use cookies if I was doing it on my own. Here's one
Use the
cookie
cookies,
and
brother.
everything
Use the cookies.
minus the cookies. Oh, you ate the cookie. All right, we don't have that cookie anymore. Um, so, MicroStrategy just have a lot of Bitcoin, and their stock price has taken a huge hammering. A large part of that is the dilution, the heavy dilution from the millions of shares to in the, I think it was 100 billion shares or something, a huge dilution, and then using that money to buy Bitcoin. And more recently, Josh, they've been using the money actually to buy cash to pay
Yeah,
the dividends.
there.
But they
That's a
don't have money to
defensive
pay
move.
the dividends.
Yeah, it's a defensive move there.
So that's a bit of a red flag for me. That now they've become, instead of Bitcoin buyers, they still are buying bits and pieces, but they're now diversifying into the US dollars so they don't default on their dividend payments. How long can they keep doing that? I think they hope to keep doing that until a new bull run comes. Well, that could be another 10 months. So I think they have enough cash to do that.
So
So really, the
let's
question
break it
is,
down in plain talk, Mark. So
yes,
there's a lot who believe that the top is in, and that strategy isn't positioned correctly to be able to pay out their dividends and to meet their expectations. And they're basically already being targeted by there's a group of people that aggressively, bears who aggressively target over leveraged companies,
yeah,
and they make all their money by bringing them down. And so
yeah.
it seems as if Michael Saylor and strategies up on the chopping block, and the bears are drooling. Okay. And so right now there's a decision at hand on the 15th, right, to see whether or not they would be essentially removed from the NASDAQ. Is that correct? What do they have to do
The
specifically?
Nasdaq. Well, they don't have to do anything. The MCSI index, which is its own index, which are part of many funds, and the Nasdaq 100, which I think people will be most familiar. So let's just stick with that one. If it gets removed from those, then any companies that hold that, the Nasdaq 100 or the MC, that they have to sell their MicroStrategy. So that's potential billions of dollars of MicroStrategy being sold. But I think I bring it back to the retail. Let's say, Josh, you're an owner of MicroStrategy. I don't know if you are or not, but let's say that you are. How would you feel, and how would you feel if you were a holder, that your buying of the shares has essentially funded other people's dividends, and they've been selling, you're buying and they're just dumping it to buy Bitcoin, which you don't get any benefit from. You don't own any of it. And the dividends that you're not really getting a whole lot of, unless you're holding one of other MicroStrategy's product, which is also just tanking. And I just think that it's a very high risk play. And I think there's a lot of people that are holding MicroStrategy now that are in quite a big loss, and they're in such a big loss, too big a loss to sell in their minds, but something is going to trigger that. And I think a January 15th event potentially does trigger that, because the news will go like wildfire that they're going to get delisted, and there's going to be forced selling of the offloading the shares in the billions.
And do you feel like that's a
And
significant enough event to bring Bitcoin down with it?
I do think so, because I think there is going to be a good enough percentage of people that just aren't educated enough in the space
That they'll
to
still be
say,
caught by
well,
surprise.
yeah, they'll say, hey, I'm not going to hold the Bitcoin because if MicroStrategy gets worse for them. Because what is going to cause people to buy the MicroStrategy stock? It's really if Bitcoin price appreciates, and then generally speaking go, oh, I'll buy MicroStrategy as the side play here. I'll buy that because that will normally
MicroStrategies has
appreciate as
always been
Bitcoin
like
is
a
going up.
2x of Bitcoin. That's the way
Yeah,
it had
it's
operated.
but I'm not sure it's going to do that in the future, just because they've just this massive share dilution and their whole. And I just think it came down to greed, with Saylor just buying way too much at the top, and he just didn't need to. He could have kept his Bitcoin holdings easily below the threshold to not be considered a fund there. And I just don't understand. where he just was loading and so heavy right at where Bitcoin's normal top came in, and the charts were screaming, we're pretty high here. It wasn't like, hey, there just doesn't, I mean, they're called strategy, but there just didn't seem to be much
Yeah,
strategy there.
I love
And
that point. I wanted to make this as well, that a lot of people have heard this saying that bulls make money, bears make money, hogs get slaughtered, but they don't
yeah,
fully understand it. And I want to make it crystal clear. Okay. You can make money playing the bullish move of a stock or crypto going up, right? And then when it gets to a place of resistance or gets too hot, you can make money trading it down. Okay. So both are valid strategies. But you turn in from a bull to a hog if you never take profit and it goes to the top of resistance and then it gets all the signals of reversal and topping out. If you sit there and you think, no, it's not over, you have transformed from a bull to a hog. The same thing can happen from a bear to a hog. Bulls make money, bears make money, but hogs get slaughtered on Wall Street. And it does appear
yeah,
as if Michael Saylor has only been adamant. I like him for it. When Bitcoin's screaming higher in the new cycle, I like to, how's Michael Saylor feeling? Because he's got to be feeling himself. He's pumped up. But then he every year turns into a hog by buying too late in the strategy. I then
but
think
there
of
is a
Tim
bull
Cook.
case.
Yeah, I got to give a shout out to Tim Cook from Apple. He's going to enter into this conversation a little bit later in the show. But Tim, whenever Apple's down, I start beating up Tim. He can handle it. He's a billionaire. And I start kind of picking on him for, not spending money, for not investing correctly in AI, moving too slow, failed projects. Everything's a pricing strategy. But when I start to look at a company like MicroStrategy, I think, man, he needs to call Tim Cook and get some advice on how to run his company.
Yeah.
But anyways,
Yeah, it's
um,
true. But the bull case is, what if they don't get delisted, which is also a possibility that they come to that decision. I think MicroStrategy is going to get a bit of a lift from that, because I feel like the fear of their being delisted could potentially be priced in. So, there's a few ways to play it. I think for January 15th, if they don't get delisted, I think that could give MicroStrategy a little bit of a boost. I wouldn't say that they'll go on some kind of parabolic run unless it's succinctly timed with Bitcoin having its relief bounce, which it might work out to be. We might see some double good news with Bitcoin having a bounce and MicroStrategy not getting delisted. Otherwise, I'm going short, Josh, on
yeah.
MicroStrategy,
Well,
and I'm going to
that's
make
really
some
one of the
money as that
reasons.
thing
Yeah,
plummets.
that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this show, Mark, was to one to educate, prepare people, and let them understand. Now, real quick, you would acknowledge, though, that there already are a lot of folks who have piled up in the short position and that haven't cashed out. And so as a result, it wouldn't shock me or you if we pushed up to 93 to even potentially as high as 98 and wipe them out before going longer, before going down more. I'm just curious, as you said, I mean, right now, a lot of bad news been priced in with this story we're talking about. But if for some reason things didn't work out that way, the money could move to liquidate those individuals on a scale of, I'm going to put it to you, what's the likelihood? Thumbs up, Bitcoin's going higher to wipe them out. Thumbs down. What would you give the listeners right now? You can only choose. I don't want no explanation, no
Yeah,
technical.
I would give thumbs up. I'm going to go with the Bitcoin taking the path that it's taken before, where we come up and retest that 200-day moving average, which would become come and where that 200-day moving average is. But I would put it up there in the 90s to maybe 100, 105K,
Yeah.
depending if it takes a month or two. But yeah, there's no doubt that the shorts are piling in, and a short squeeze where those shorts get squeezed out and that pops the price up. It's just like a pimple. You just pop that pimple and off it goes, and the
What a
price
visual,
just
Mark.
exploded. And the reality is, whether, and people may not really understand this entirely if they don't understand leverage, is that the crypto market is moved primarily by leverage more than spot buying.
Yes.
There is
Yes.
like an
Yes.
incredible billions
Okay,
of
wait, wait,
dollars
wait, wait.
per
I want
day
to, Mark. I
are
want you
liquidated.
to remember your son and the cookies. Um, I really want you to remake that point because most retail traders hone in on stories of adoption and institutional adoption and other dynamics, whale purchases and those types of things, on-chain mechanics, and they don't understand what you just said regarding liquidation levels versus spot buying. Can you break them down very elementarily, even better than the word I just butchered, and make it simple for them?
Yeah, so I liken it to a fire. For a fire to continue, it needs fuel. And let's just say the main fuel is it needs vegetation to trees and to burn through. And when that runs out, it tends to kind of fritter out and die off. And leverage is that fuel. And what I would warn people about is the people that really get burned and most in leverage is those who get into the positions too late shorts or late longs. They FOMO in when it starts pumping, and what will happen is it only just takes a little. The drier the area gets for fire, the more likely it is to burn quicker. And I've likened to that to the more money that piles in to go short. Well, as soon as the price starts to move a little, it starts to liquidate those short positions. Now, those short positions have to be covered, and that simulates a spot buy of Bitcoin, and it will push that price up. And then it becomes like a domino effect where the first domino goes down until all the dominoes are finished and there's no dominoes left. And you don't want to be buying when the dominoes have all run out because you think it's an actual legitimate run, but it's really just people getting liquidated. And when the liquidations run out, the price stops going up because it's not driven primarily. Yes, there's spot buyers in there, but it's not primarily driven by spot buys. It's by people who went short and bet that the price would go down, but the price didn't go down. It went up and they got liquidated. The position had to be covered and up the price continues to go. So generally what we see at these times are the accumulation of short contracts. As price stays down, more and more people get bearish and bearish. And we just had that trust. I mean, on Christmas Day, Josh, $7 million stolen from a wallet called Trust. Nobody did anything wrong. Nobody gave over their keys or anything. This is obviously what is considered the second best method of storing Bitcoin and other altcoins behind, having your own cold wallet, your Ledger or your Trezor or whatever you choose. Trust Wallet is similar to MetaMask, but meant to be more of a wallet, more secure, and they got completely exploited for $7 million. So that just brings more bearishness to the market and more of those short contracts. And then when there is enough fuel for the fire to really give a good burn to the upside, the market makers who wash trade up and down crypto just need a little move and liquidate those 100x Bitcoiners who've gone short, and then it just bleeds through the rest to the upside until it kind of runs out. So that's generally what my next expectation. That's why I gave the thumbs up. That is what you've said exactly is what I think will be Bitcoin's next move. However, look, even though I think it's the most probable scenario, as we know in crypto, in trading, and especially in crypto, nothing is guaranteed. We've seen some differences this cycle, like a new all-time high for Bitcoin coming in before the halving. And I wouldn't be surprised they could send it down lower before it goes up. So if 85K doesn't hold, then I think we could be down for some more downside there. Like I said, 1 million Bitcoin contracts there at 85K. So that's why it's holding. Those people are not selling. But if that level gets broken, then we might see those people just kind of panic a little bit and start to offload the Bitcoin. Because I think with a decent black swan event, I think Bitcoin could get as low as the 40s. Bear market
You're
low,
getting
and as
ahead.
high as the
You're getting
70s.
ahead. You're getting ahead. All right. I got a very important question. Mark's going to give the whole thing at one time. So Pete C asked this extremely important question. He says, strategy would be 10x more profitable if they had Josh and Kiwi Mo in charge of their purchases. They had zero timing. Strategy needs to hire some traders like Josh.
Yeah.
The real question here is this:
I agree.
should we change Mark's name? Should he abide with Kiwi Mo, or should we start calling him Money Mark? Let me know in the comments what is Mark's name. First of all, I think Mark does great. Okay, I want to dive in a little bit to the bull case on Bitcoin right now. So recently, Barron's reported a really big deal. It matters to me that Vanguard lifted its ban on crypto ETFs and funds on their brokerage platform, right? So basically, they had not really been in a position where they had been allowing these items to be purchased across the board. They lifted their ban. This was adoption news as of December 2nd, and it just points to the bigger story that I know that when you're hearing me or Mark talk about where we're at and how bearish or bullish things are right now, the underlining truth behind Bitcoin is that we are seeing even more and more adoption. We've got the fact that institutional BlackRock owns $68 billion as of December 24th, 2025. And so you're now seeing a huge door kicked wide open for people to buy Bitcoin. And in that environment, Bitcoin is been steadily bleeding off and coming off of those local highs. I think that it is quite likely that the local top is in for this particular cycle. However, I have done something with my money that obviously reflects what it is I truly believe. Because, you put your money where your mouth is. And I had sold all of my altcoins December of 2024, except for my Bitcoin. And I began to shift entirely from an accumulate and hold strategy from 2022 and 2023. I got a wholesale cash out mode, right? And I called that out. And I have kept my Bitcoin. I was happy to do it. It went up high. It was enjoyable to see when it went up high. And it's come down off of those highs. But I made a decision that I was never going to sell my Bitcoin again. One, personally don't need the money. Two, I would like to grow wealth. And as we got where we currently are sitting on the price, I kicked on daily buys. And I know this is not going to work for everybody. And it's not as strategic as trading every day. But I've learned long enough that by looking at the last 20 years of my trading experience, that all I should have ever done was hold Apple. All I should have ever done was hold NVIDIA. I would be worth many, 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 many millions of dollars if I just held the positions that I bought back in 2007, right? That's all I needed to do is just hold them and buy more. And I had a change of character in my psychology towards Bitcoin, and I started buying daily. Now, just the other day, indiscriminately, I got even more excited about buying Bitcoin under 100,000, under 90K, and I doubled my buys, okay? But we all have to have a strategy because we want to, I'm a chart guy and I want to follow the charts. And I'm going to lay it out for you guys today. I'm going to shoot it to you straight, and then we'll get my Money Mark Kiwi Mo to give us his strategy, which he kind of already did. But I'm going to press him for some more details. I'm going to ask him about when is he cracking his wallet open? When is he going to get greedy and start wanting to not miss buying Bitcoin? But so right now, I am leaning towards believing that we have the potential for a short squeeze to the upside. And we're going to be looking, that move would be on hold and would be greatly diminished if we were to close back beneath 85,000. Let me pull up the chart. We're sitting at 87,380. And so let me just pull that in real quick. I'll take us to the chart. All right. Now, I will say to you guys that the last time Mark and I did a show, I think not the last show, but the previous to that last show, it was sitting right here. Price was right here. And I said to everybody then, I said, we haven't broken down yet, so I've got to remain optimistic. I said, but you have to know that if we ever close a two-day candle or 2 daily candles, same as a 2-day candle, or a weekly candle underneath 107, that means that this up move is completely broken. We've broken structure and we're going down. And I said then that would mean that we're on a pretty substantial pullback but the up move is really officially over if we lose 100. I said it's a huge psychological level, and we really shouldn't lose it again if we're going to be trending up for the remainder of 2025, early part of 2026. Well, we broke that as well. So we're sitting down here. So now I'm saying that we are moving back up. We have the opportunity for a short squeeze, but I'm looking at two prices. We're going to go 84, which is it's really just here at the bottom of this monthly candle. And we're just trading the structure of this particular monthly candle. I think it makes perfect sense. I'd love to get Mark's feedback when I'm done, but we're in a perfect spot to trade the monthly candle. The top of that is at 100. The bottom of that is right around 84. So in my opinion, this is a great point of control, this one candle. If we break beneath it, then forget about this wick. We're going to be coming down much lower. The trigger for a much lower move would actually be, in my opinion, 85. It can come down to 85 and bounce, but we don't want a weekly close beneath 83,814.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to say we don't want a weekly close beneath 83,814, or up move is really off the table. I think it's far more likely that we get a green candle here. And that's another reason I don't think that Bitcoin has to run in conjunction with the market. It really hasn't been, because right now on the SPY, we're up at all-time highs and Bitcoin has fallen dramatically. And so I don't know, maybe there's some rotation, maybe gold and silver, cool off for a while, and maybe the SPY and the QQQ cool off, and we see, Bitcoin have a good month and we backtest potentially as high as 100, maybe 105, but I would doubt it. And then we potentially, if we close back beneath what I'll refer to as 83, then we are definitely coming down. And I'm just going to give it to you now. My ideal price to buy. I'm just going to pop my head face back up. So I've got 7 figures double sitting on the sideline, and I want to put it into Bitcoin. And for me, now this is the question, and me and Mark haven't talked, and I value and respect Mark's point of view. And in these conversations, my ideas can shift a little bit. So my ideal buy price, so it's not the absolute potential low, but it would be 65,000. And I don't know that I'm not a lump sum buyer kind of a guy, but I'm pretty sure my buys would start being substantial at 65K. Now, Mark threw out a number of 40K. And I know that some people will get angry at that because maybe they're not technical. I know Mark is wanting us to have a clear understanding of what is possible from a technical perspective. Yeah. Mark, what do you think of my buy price at 65? Now, to clarify, I am buying Bitcoin, right? Solana, every single day right now. Okay. So I'm DCAing because in my mind, Bitcoin's going to be 200K in a couple years. And so I have money on the sidelines. I'm going to put it in something and park it. And that right now is those two cryptos. I have some other things, small things going on, but that's my game plan right now. Mark, what are your thoughts on those levels? And then talk to me why I shouldn't be more patient and wait for 40K.
Yeah, look, I think what I'll say is just some things that make sense to me, and hopefully they'll resonate with people watching as well. I think the first thing that makes sense to me with what you just said is historically Bitcoin has never gone below the election week low, which is sitting at around about 66K. So historically, that if that were to happen, that would have been something that has never been happened before. So that's not a bad area to identify right off the bat and say, hey, around that mid 60s area.
To me, that's the logical best case bottom, logically from the charts as we know them right now.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. However, I do think it can go lower. Not that it would, because it hasn't historically. And it really depends where the 200-week moving average is by the time we do get down to around that area. Currently, it's sitting at 57. And I'll tell you, when Bitcoin's lost the 50-week moving average, which obviously it lost a little while ago now, it's always come back to test that before going on to a new all-time high. That's sitting at 57 right now, but we don't know what price that's going to be when it comes down. So, obviously it's going to be higher than what it is now. So what makes sense to me is your buy price is 65. That makes sense to me. It also makes sense to me that we could go a little bit lower. There's nothing, up until last cycle, Bitcoin had never gone below its previous high. And then it did that. It went below it, but that took a black swan event to do it. I don't think it would have had there not been the FTX. So there's some things that we don't know that we don't know. And there's some things that we know, and we just have to go with what we know. And so those things make sense to me. I could see Bitcoin, if we look at how historically midterm election cycle has played out every single year for the last 100 years without fail. What we've seen, I think Bitcoin, when the stock market drops, it does drop with it. It's not always pumping when the stock market pumps. That's the whole point of a bear market, is generally when there's good news, it doesn't do anything. And then when there's bad news, it just goes down. And sometimes on good news, it goes down. And what we've seen historically is, a drop sometime between April and June. Now, if we go just off the last 25 years, the stock market has topped on average mid-June and then bottomed by around the end of September. So if that was to repeat and the stock market was to find a bit of a top and then go down, that's where the wholesale and may go away comes from, exactly from that, and then go down through to find a bottom sometime in September. Then they have the midterm elections. There's certainty now, and the market likes that uncertainty. Likes the certainty, doesn't like the uncertainty, and then we take off again. Well, that times up with a new bull run for Bitcoin starting in, the time to buy Bitcoin in October 2026. Now, overall, if we're to take the full span of mid-election years, actually the top is mid-April, but the bottom is still September. It still lands in that September zone. So what we could see with Bitcoin, Josh, is a little bit quarter one. I'm expecting a rally, a push. This is where all the super cyclists are going to come back in and say Bitcoin's coming to a new all-time high. Did you buy the dip, etc.? And I want to make sure I'm not left behind on that. I'm going to be a buyer, but it's more of a trade that could turn. And if they're right, I'm going to be good, because if we do make a new all-time high, I'm going to be in a trade. And if we don't, I'll look to cut the trade when the trade goes bearish. What I think will happen, Bitcoin has that push up in the first quarter of 2026. Then we see that usual drop. And by the way, Bitcoin usually does drop between that June to September any year, even in a bull run. Have a look. Bitcoin's always had that downside, even more so in a bear market. So I think then we get very bearish and go much lower, potentially down to that low of 65, maybe a bit lower. And look, I bring 40 in there because I do want people to be prepared that that's a real possibility, that we do come down with enough FUD, with enough black swan kind of stuff going on, that we could go there. Do I think we're going to the 40s? I think that's less likely. I think the most likely scenario is somewhere in the mid 60s, 65 through to about that $74,000 level. That would be my zone. But of course, there are some things that we don't know. And maybe MicroStrategy gets into more trouble. There's some things that aren't disclosed, and that could obviously just absolutely capitulate the price. So that's my pick, is that quarter one rebound for Bitcoin and crypto, goes on a little bit of a run, gets rejected as normal, that 200-day moving average up there, currently at about 107, but it's coming down. And then we go into a deeper bear period somewhere between April, June through to September. And then we come out, and that's probably going to be the best time, in my opinion, where I'll be looking, because we were talking about Bitcoin strategies, Josh, and I know you're buying Bitcoin every day, but I also know that when Bitcoin has any kind of a deep correction, you're going to add extra to it, because that's exactly what I would
Yep.
do. And that's the smart thing to do. So I know that you're doing that. I know that I'm going to be doing that. However, the simplest, most proven strategy of all is the simple 500-day strategy. That if you just buy Bitcoin every cycle, about 500 days before the halving, and just hold it until 500 days after the halving,
It's worked
then
perfectly.
they would have been the perfect time to both, almost the perfect time, within a few $1,000s only, and that's all you need to do. It's the buy and go on a cruise signal. I have a buy and go to the beach signal, but I would call that the buy and go on a cruise signal. So that's also, and that 500 days before the halving, guess where it is? October in 2026, right where the midterm elections are, where things start to lift up, right where the stock market usually bottoms and crypto usually bottoms. And so I think there's some seasonal things at play that we should consider and think about when we look at our strategy on bigger picture.
All right, one more thing to show you in the chart. I'm going to get Mark's view of this. So we obviously have this potential of a pretty obvious head and shoulders pattern, left shoulder, head. This is the weekly chart. And if we did bounce here, as both Mark and I are suggesting that we likely would, and potentially, I mean, it would be a lot to get above 100. But let's just say we got to 105, best case scenario. That would give us that right shoulder. And we would take this move right here from the top of this. And there's a lot of argument could go into where exactly to pull this, but a very, very rough move would suggest the potential if this were to complete. And it also depends on whether I've drawn my line correctly. So let's make a couple adjustments, but let's call that the breakdown. That does suggest, if that played out on a very high time frame, it does suggest a move potentially down to 50K. I'm not calling that. I'm just saying that it's something to be aware of visually.
Yeah, I agree.
That it does present an opportunity of where Bitcoin could go. Personally, I have a very different strategy, and it may not be helpful to some of you. Others, it might be helpful to you. Let me pull Mark back up. And that strategy is, I just regret not owning more. And I just believe that every purchase I make, whether it's $87, $87,000 today, or whether it's 50, I think that all of those purchases are going to be 200K in the coming days. And so that's just my personal view. And so I know that when we get closer to these important events, maybe even Mark and I might do a show on January 15th when this MicroStrategy will come to a head, or we might react to the news and what Bitcoin and comment on what Bitcoin technically is doing. But the bottom line is I don't own enough Bitcoin, and it's been an incredibly amazing performing asset. And I feel the same way about NVIDIA. I don't think NVIDIA is going anywhere. And the minute we stopped pumping and we pulled back into the 170s, I thought I don't really care if it goes to 150. This is a good time for me to buy NVIDIA because I believe it's going to be king again in 2026. Now, that's a different strategy. I do a lot of swing trading, but when you guys hear me stop talking about swing trading and just wanting more exposure, it's because I'm looking at a bigger picture view of my portfolio. All right, I want to talk briefly about a real underdog stock, and I'm going to go through a stock that I want to look at with everybody today, and then I'm going to get Mark to give me his hottest trade or his best pick for 2026. Maybe he can give me a super hot trade for today going into next week, or he can get me a stock that he wants to hold and buy all of 2026, stock or crypto. But I'm going to talk briefly about Nike. Now, in the Stocks with Josh Discord, I was asked to chart Nike the other day, and I did like a 10-minute deep dive analyzing price structure, momentum, and volume, the PSMV, analyzing it from head to toe. And one thing that I determined is that from a technical perspective, there was no justifiable reason to buy this because buyers had not showed up, right? It just technically was kind of like trying to catch a falling knife. The up story, the reversal moment, the reversal pivot, whether it be based on momentum or volume, hadn't appeared yet. But I think it's really worth talking about right now because this could potentially be the biggest reversal story on Wall Street in 2026. And this brings us back to Tim Cook. Now, Tim Cook, who's not a buyer of stocks. Okay. He doesn't rarely buy Apple stock because he's issued quite a bit of it. But he purchased $3 million of Nike here. It was his first purchase of either Apple or Nike in over 15 years. So that's interesting. We know Tim is a straight money guy, and he's he's not a high risk taker. So what did he see in Nike that caused him to believe that this was an obvious buy? If you dive into the fundamentals, the truth is they've done a lot to damage their brand. They alienated some distributors. They just kind of did everything wrong. But they do have a new CEO who's really part of the legacy team. And a lot of people, Elliott Hill, he's been there since 1988 when they're actually doing everything right. And now he's got the opportunity to lead this company. And who knows? Tim Cook could be personal friends with this guy. I mean, Tim Cook goes, I don't know his circles that he walks in, but he somehow believes that this company's turning around. And a lot of people are mocking buyers of Nike right now if they're buying it purely because Tim Cook has got in. Right off the bat, I'd love to hear from you. If you put a 1 in the chat or a 0 in a chat, if you think any credibility should be given to this news event. I'm kind of curious how you guys take it. And then another interesting development. So that in of itself, I found it very interesting. It didn't actually get me to crack open my wallet and start buying. But then I had another little hit of a news event that I thought you guys might find interesting. There has been a whale who has bought, what's the dollar amount? I think it's right around $5 million. Let me see here. Yeah. So there's been, it was around $3.3 million Nike Leap call buyer betting on $70 a share. They added another $2.3 million to their position, even after the price had gone up, bringing their long up to $5.6 million. And I thought you guys would find it interesting. The exact leap that they bought was Nike NKE $70 strike calls January 21st, 2028. So those are pretty far out there, 757 days. Now, I wanted because I was kind of looking at this and I thought, maybe I'll play along. It's a pretty far out there strategy. This thing is so freaking down on the lows. But another way, I was kind of examining this, another way that you could possibly buy this would be to buy that exact leap, but you could then sell a higher priced or a higher strike. Okay, so it would cap the amount of money that you could make, but it would highly offset the cost of your initial investment. So what you would do is you'd buy the Nike 70 strike calls January 21st, 2028, and you would sell the 90 strike calls for 2028. And so this would dramatically reduce your risk. It also would cap your upside potential. But interesting strategy. Before I dive too deep into it, I'm going to take a minute and go over the chart. Mark, when I come back, I'd love to get your thoughts on Nike. And then I'm going to ask you guys an important question about another underdog. I'm going to give you a choice. If you could choose between Nike and this other one, which I'll leave unrevealed, which one would be the better underdog story? So let me jump into the chart with you guys. We're going to look at Nike real quick. I want you guys just to visualize a few things for me. One, we've come all the way back to the 2020 lows. So when the world thought that, everybody was going to be stuck in their homes for eternity and we all had to Zoom each other for the holidays, Nike came all the way down here to about $60. And pretty much the Wall Street has said, yeah, Nike lives in this apocalyptic world as far as we're concerned. Price is justifiably back here. If you bought, this is over a decade, okay? If you bought $10,000 worth of Nike, 10 years ago, you have lost money, versus imagine buying $10,000 worth of NVIDIA, you'd be a millionaire right now. But if you had put that money in Nike, you'd be under 10K. But let's talk about some things that are potential here. I want to talk about some structure that we're getting closer and closer. You see, I've got two lines drawn on my chart. I've got this descending line of resistance, which has repeatedly rejected the price. But we're starting to begin to make higher lows. And when you go into the RSI story, we're beginning to have bullish divergence there. And so when you put all that together, we are compressing up against this line and starting to get multiple touches here at this historic level. And if you look at the volume range visual profile on the right side, when you pull in a lot of the chart, you begin to see that we are sandwiched right now between this massive support level right here, okay? The biggest support level on this chart is right where the price is right now, okay? And this goes back all the way to this historic level. If we were to lose this level, then Nike's in big trouble. But a lot of people are speculating that this historic level is an area that's worth buying Nike, and that if it breaks out above this descending line, it could be the beginning of a long-term upswing. And that's why they're putting on those 2028 leaps. Because they don't have the buy signal, but it's attractive. Okay, let's look at this structure. So you see I've got this descending channel drawn on the chart. And I want to highlight that this is actually, we also have a potential bullish inverse head and shoulders pattern and a neckline right there. So everything sort of converges on this level right here. I think the first breakout level for NVIDIA is 65. And then after that, it's got to get above 75. And the obvious target for it on the weekly time frame is to move back to the 200-week moving average, which I'm guessing is right around $83 here by the time it could potentially get back there. If this price had a huge surge moment and back tested the 200-day moving average, it could literally go between March and October. It could vacillate here another 6 months before breaking out again in late 2026. But this initial move may be what smart money is betting on, this burst up, the bears getting trapped again. And then I want to look at volume. Let's do that real quick. Yeah, you can also see that when price was coming down, there was this pivot point right here at the low. All of these volume nodes, the big ones are the red ones. But ever since we got down here, you can see that we've got 4 big nodes. 3 of them are buys. 1 of them was a sell. So the fact is, this was the pivot here for so far. The volume story has shifted from selling to buying. Is there stealth accumulation on Nike that's going to continue to show up more and more over time? Mark, you've probably spent some time on the Nike chart. What do you think of it right now?
Yeah, I think there's a potential for a reversal. It's not enough to get me excited. Excuse me. I think if it was to water here. Excuse me. Something on my throat. You might want to take it.
Oh, I'm sorry, man. All right, well, let me ask you this question. Okay, so what I like most about that chart is that historic line of resistance that it's been under. I'll give you the exact date. It began its fall in November of 2021. We've been falling on Nike, for the last 3 to 4 years. And when we finally are catching up at the bottom of historic price and that historic resistance, when it breaks above it, that's something that a lot of Wall Street will pay attention to. The stock guys will pay attention to it. But a stock that's doing the exact same thing right now is IREN. And so both of these have been underdogs. And I know that there's some folks out there that like IREN. Let me show it to you guys real quick. And I'm curious whether if you had to choose between IREN or NVIDIA, which would you choose right now? I'm going to pull up the historic resistance.
How about IRN and Nike?
I'm sorry. What did I say? IRN and yes, I apologize.
Did you mean to say IRN and Nike, or
I meant to say IRN and Nike? Yes, thank you for paying attention.
You said NVIDIA. I wasn't sure, but I would take IRN for sure in a heartbeat.
IRN and Nike. It's IRN.
IRN all day for me, Josh. IRN all day.
Yeah. It's also been under a pretty big wall of resistance. That's actually the last time this thing gave, not given too many green candles. The last time it gave a green candle was in October of 2025, and it's been falling ever since. But this really isn't that bad of a pullback, and it's going to soon break potentially this could soon break above this historic line of resistance, but so could Nike. So, what are your thoughts, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think with Iran, right now the chart's not magnificent, but if you gave me a choice right now to say, okay, buy and hold one for the next few years, I'd probably go with Iran. But however, I wouldn't, me personally, I wouldn't necessarily be, right now Iran was at $40. That's right where the 9 EMA on the weekly, on the daily time frame is. So potentially that would be, if that was to hold, then that could be something I would get interested in. But for Nike, it's below the 9 EMA on the weekly there at 63. It's below its 50-week moving average. That's 50-week moving average is the bull market support. So I'd like to see a little bit more strength. I'd like to see a little bit more evidence that Nike's going to do something more than pump. What did it pump from Tim Cook's? Yeah, pump, what, $3?
Yeah, it
From
didn't
Tim
get it.
Cook
Tim
saying that
Cook
he's going to
didn't.
buy.
I'll admit that
That's a
Tim
red
Cook
flag for
didn't
me.
scare the Bears. They
Yeah,
didn't.
that's a red flag for me when someone like Tim Cook, Apple comes out, has a buy, maybe there's a partnership with Apple coming or whatever, and the stock moves $3. That's a little bit of a red flag for me. But this is something, with Nike. It's, we all love the story. If you've read the book Shoe Dog, very inspirational. I don't think they've made some good advertising and marketing decisions over the past few years, and I think that's really hurt them. And maybe they can turn that around. But for me, I'd like to see a little bit more than a $3 move from Tim Cook buying personally.
All right, I like that. I'm looking at it. I haven't put any money on it yet. I'll let you guys know. It's. I think I'm a bit more interested in it than Mark. I think. A couple quick questions, and I'm going to ask Mark for his pick for 2026 or next week. IGMs. Hi, Josh. What if we were to close a weekly above 100K or 105? Not good enough. We have to get above 107, which is really, I think, the trigger for the breakdown. In my opinion, we got to close above 107. And I would even like to see a follow through week after that on high volume.
Yeah,
So
I
all that
agree.
we would do to get to 100 or 105 is to complete the right shoulder of that bearish head and shoulders pattern. And Jet Alaska is, I always giggle a little when Josh says have instead of have. I probably am saying it wrong, but I appreciate that. Okay, Mark, what do you have for us? What do you have for us? You had your Palladium pick. Are you going? Are you holding your winner? What are you doing right now?
I like ASML. I
All right.
like ASML. There's a couple of reasons that I like it. One, that has a monopoly, and that's always good.
Well, China's.
Um,
I just saw that news story the other day. Sorry for cutting you off. That they're making
no,
some
go tell
serious
me.
headway. Go ahead, ASML.
But okay, so they have a monopoly for now. The market cap's still fairly small when you compare it to the Nvidias of the world. Still, 400 billion. There, they have about 300 shares there as well. And I do like it. You can't, Nvidia can't function. Smartphones can't function without this company. So I mean, it is an extremely necessary company. I mean, people can dig in but they have the ultimate monopoly. You cannot make 3 nm or 2 nm chips, the kind used in iPhones, AI servers, NVIDIA, without these machines. These machines cost between $200 to $350 million each. So because there is no alternative supplier, ASML has immense pricing power to maintain gross margins above 50%. So I do like it. Look, it's over $1,000, so you can always trade the 2x leverage ETF, which is like $25. That's
Is this a trade or
AS.
investment, Mark?
Well, I think it can be both. So I think this is an investment, yes, for next year. But if you wanted to trade it, you could trade the 2x leverage ETF out there, which is what the ticker. The ticker is ASML, and the 2x leverage ETF is called ASMG. You can buy that for $25. And for some people, that might be a stronger option rather than forking out $1,000 for the share right now. But I think it can go much higher than the $1,000. The reason it's $1,000 is because the market cap is because the shares, they don't have a whole lot of shares. They haven't diluted like MicroStrategy did. They got 300 million shares there, and I think there can be some more upside. There's a lot of strength in that chart. It didn't seem to dip too heavy in the latest little dip that we had. It's maintained above the 9 EMA on both the weekly and the 20 and above the 50-day moving average where it's found support. So I think that could be something for next year, and it certainly can be considered a trade to trade on a shorter, more medium swing trade as well. And if people felt like they wanted to, I think mentally you buy something for $25 plus you're getting 2x the gain. So if ASML goes up by 10%, ASMG, the 2x leverage ETF, will go up by 20%. So that's something for people to consider. Of course, if it goes the wrong way, it loses twice as fast as well. But that is what stop losses are for.
I'm gonna just show this to you, Mark, and get your opinion on it. So here's the ASML chart. I had drawn previously this descending channel based on some other charting, probably these respected levels here and here, and but you notice how here and here. Do you notice how we're pretty far away when we get around 40% away from the 200 weekly moving average? It's kind of what I've been saying with the SPY. It tends to need to come home. What's nice is that when you look at this chart, it's clearly making higher highs and higher lows. And so nobody can argue that it's trending higher. But right now it is, right now it's 32% away from this support level of around 787. But personally, this, that's why I was curious about your target up. If this continues to trend, I would lean towards believing, based on just some reverse math, that this would give me a target of around 1280. As a potential, 1282. That's a potential. But after that, I would not want to be holding this. So if we were to get above this peak, this is your trade window right here. I like Mark's idea, and I don't doubt it, but that's your trade window. And then truth be told, a more attractive scenario, depending on what's going on in the market, would be to potentially short this if it were to hit this level and give us a bad wick. I would be interested in shorting it all the way back to support between 1,000, the psychological level of 1,000 and 902. So curious thoughts on that, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, and there's something, they could do a stock split. That could be quite smart to, people think and say, hey, I'm spend $1,000, I'm getting one of those stocks. And if they do a stock split, the price will be less there. Like Netflix, I think Netflix recently did that. So my target, my first target was the 1272 Fibonacci at 1255. I think it get as high as the 1618 at 1439, but I think you're bang on. I think we see that normal stock market correction, and usually the stock market does correct fairly significantly, I think around 20% on average before the midterm elections. So that would lead and support your thesis of a pullback to that 200 or around that 200-week moving average, which is where I would look to load up a lot heavier, not just on ASML, but on other stocks as well, during that usual down window between June, July, August, and bottoming out in September, as it's done in a midterm election cycle. So I would 100% agree with you to the upside. Those targets are around about where my targets are to the upside. And then, I have the stock market, including ASML and other stocks coming back and having a decent correction in the summertime. And the sell in May and go away, although it's more recently been sell in June and go away. May has been a bit more bullish than normal, and it's May's been too early. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next year.
I'm going to come back to you, Mark, with a question from one of the fam here. Serge 0083 or Sergio, I don't know. When would be 500 days before the next halving, and what date would be 500 days after the first? So I think what he's asking is maybe the top. So give us a couple dates very clear without explanation, just so that they're nice and clean. But real quick, while you're working on that, I'm going to just mention that while Mark was talking, I threw a fib trend-based extension on ASML, and interestingly, it gives me the exact target that I gave you where I drew that. So it is 1289 as a potential fib target above. So I would say that definitely, if this were to break 1139, that's right there, then the target potentially would be 1289. Be mindful of that if you're interested in ASML. And then, to be honest, I'd probably be, unless it had some incredible news, I would be looking to short it back to the magnet moving average line. So what do you say, Mark? What are the most important dates in Bitcoin ahead of us right now, based on the 500-day observation?
So these are going to be estimates, because remember, Bitcoin is mined and it depends how quickly or slowly it's mined. But it's going to be pretty close. So October 2026 is when should be 500 days before the halving, but it could come a little earlier. It could come a little later. It's going to be around that time. As we get closer, we can get more accurate with that. And then as far as 500 days after the halving is going to be around August of 2029. Now, of course, really that date isn't as important, because you can know that date as soon as the halving happens. So once the halving is locked in, then you know exactly what 500 days is going to be. But August, so imagine this, let's just say that the halving is going to be October 500 days, and you buy October 2026. Literally, the best strategy in Bitcoin has been not selling till August of 2029. You sit there, go on a cruise, chill, and then just sell your Bitcoin 500 days after. So just keep an eye on those dates as the Bitcoin halving gets, the 500 days before is a little bit more guesstimating, because you're not exactly sure of the day, but it's going to be pretty close to October 2026. But once the halving happens, you can get that 500 days after, no problem, because it's locked in.
Yeah. Interestingly, I'm going to show you. So someone asked this question here. So Josh, what are you saying is the top in? And, I really want to go through a couple of important questions. And Ig M says, what are you saying is the top in? I want to point out this chart, something I've said many times regarding Bitcoin. Let me just show it to you. These are fib levels, and I've showed this chart probably 100 times in the last couple of years, that whenever Bitcoin has made a brand new high signified by the red line on these fib levels, every one of the red fib levels represents a break of the previous cycle high, okay? And every time it's ever broken the previous cycle high, at bare minimum, it's gone up to the next fib level as a general given target. Here, previous to 2021, it actually went 2 fib levels higher. Okay, I've shared this many times. Here's the previous high. It went to the next fib level. It actually went to the fib level after that. So the last cycle, when it broke above the red line, it went to the blue line, keeping it very simple. And so this was a very interesting cycle, because technically, if we don't hit this blue line, which is 173,000, it will be the absolute first time that Bitcoin broke above its previous all-time high and failed to hit the next fib level. And so I've held out hope longer in this Bitcoin cycle that it's doing something different and unique because of the institutional adoption, and that the potential of us hitting this level was still on the table. Having said that, we all have to come up with our own strategies, and we got to follow the charts. We can believe all we want in stories. It's the charts that should guide our financial decisions, in my opinion. I made the point, I made it very clearly, that the line in the sand for me was 107. And then the big line in the sand after that was the psychological level of 100. So the top may not be in for this cycle. However, I can't give Bitcoin the benefit of the doubt. However, I've chosen I don't want to sell any of my Bitcoin. So for me, not able to reconcile where the top or the bottom is because Bitcoin is doing something different than it's done by failing to get to the fib level here that it always has, because I really can't determine that. And I'm a strong believer in Bitcoin. I'm no longer going to trade my Bitcoin. Having said that, technically, any day that this was beneath $100, in my opinion, was telling us that this up move for this cycle, if the cycles are intact, is off the table. So yes, this would technically have been the top. But I'm answering you guys the best I can based on my global view. I gave you guys a perfect spot to go on the defense, which was 107, and I'm pivoting in my own particular strategy of just buy Bitcoin. I've got cash on the side, and I have a strategy. I don't know that we'll get down to 65. I'm going to buy every day, no matter what. And from when I told you guys I was buying daily, I've doubled that buy. So I was buying one amount daily a month ago. In this month, I doubled it. Now, if we get up, the big trouble I'm going to have, Mark, is if we run up to 105 and we start getting high, heavy rejection signals, I'm going to be tempted to sell, but that's not my game plan. So we all have to stick to our strategy.
Yeah.
Thank you,
No,
Mark.
and you make a good point, because when you look at the SPY, and you've got to put Bitcoin up there with the big guns, as a top 10 asset. How would you what would your strategy be? And it would be something similar. But I think Bitcoin gives us something even better, because it gives us a very predictable 4-year cycle. And there are people in the chat, and I respect what you're having to say, that you think the 4-year cycle is dead. And you might be right. And I'm prepared to say, gosh, if we get above 107K and close 2 weekly candles above that, I'll be the first one to say, the 4-year cycle, could be broken. But here's the reality: is that it's right now it's not. It's doing everything that it's always done. So I choose to have more faith in something that's always happened and is currently happening exactly as it's always happened. The October 2025 top was exactly when the 4-year cycle said it was going to happen. Then something that's never happened before, which is a super cycle there. It's just played out every single time. You watch when Bitcoin loses the 50-week moving average after 3 years of a bull market, it goes and spends a year coming down slowly to the 200-week. And it's done that every single time, and it's doing that right now. And so, I think that, Josh's strategy of buying every day is like a set and forget and just keep stacking, because he's looking 10, 20, 25 years, grandkids all having a Bitcoin each.
That's right.
Kind of scenario. And that's his strategy. And I think, whatever your plan is, it really should match your strategy. But there's nothing wrong with, if Bitcoin goes to 105 and completely rejects, of taking profits or selling your Bitcoin either. I think everybody should have a trade plan that fits their budget and their strategy, for the Bitcoin. But don't be crying if Bitcoin comes down to 50K, because I know Josh won't. Josh will be going, well, it doesn't bother me, because my strategy all along was to buy daily and then also back up the truck at 50 or 60K. And that's his strategy. And I think it's a very good strategy for, the vision and the plan that he has for Bitcoin. So figure out what strategy you have. I know I'm covered either way, because if Bitcoin begins to move to the upside, I'll jump in on a trade. And if it keeps going, I'll just keep riding it. And if Bitcoin continues to drop, as it usually has after a bit of a pump, then I can short it to the downside and be patient to wait for, those lower levels. So I think I wouldn't want anybody. I'm not closed-minded. I hope people watching this aren't closed-minded. I certainly think there's a chance that the Bitcoin 4-year cycle might come to an end, but right now it hasn't. It's playing out exactly like it does every other time. And if I said to you, Josh, I've got an asset for you that if you buy 500 days before and then were to sell 500 days after, in this case, 700% appreciation, you'd go, let's go. let's go to that asset or that place, or let's do it at that time. That right now, that's what Bitcoin is providing. Nvidia doesn't provide that. Tesla doesn't do that. The SPY does it. I think that's what's part of special with the 4-year cycle, and why there is a 4-year cycle is because there's a halving every 4 years, and that really has built that into the DNA of Bitcoin. So I'm a believer of the 4-year cycle until the 4-year cycle is proven to be broken or dead. And right now, it's never proven to be broken. It's never proven to be dead. It's always been right on time. Currently, it's following the 4-year cycle exactly like it has every other time. So I'm going to stick with that for now, but I'm certainly prepared to come on here at a later date and say, hey, that's not the case if that changes.
Yeah, I think that as far as the 4-year cycle goes, I'm going to be paying attention to it, and I'm not going to ignore it. It's an indicator at this point to me. I have a hard time ignoring the doors that have been kicked open by BlackRock and all these other exchanges that are opening up Bitcoin and even telling their people that they should have an exposure to it. And so I think, we all know that that the Bitcoin supply is going to dry up. The halving is going to come. I think that's going to be a trigger. And I think Bitcoin, it doesn't matter to me how, if we drop from 84 to 60, to me, that's about 20K worth of difference. And if I accumulate, I don't know how many I'm going to accumulate in that period, but let's say I accumulated 10, and then in 2028, we're up 250,000. I'm going to be back here referencing this video, guys. I'm going to be, I'm going to be looking at that and celebrating. So at this point, it makes sense to look long. Real quick, give a micro 1-minute commentary on silver, because I know you spent a lot of time with this. I mean, the bottom line is that a lot of the banks had a long-term suppression strategy, and one of the banks flipped the switch on everybody else because they saw which direction the money was flowing. And I mean, there was some big news out of China the other day that they actually seized a ton of silver. Mark, what would you have to say about silver? And I think I don't doubt that it would go to 100. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, look, I mean, there was a comment made earlier that somebody said about bearish divergence on one of the charts we had up, and they're 100% right. There's bearish divergence across multiple charts, including the SPY. And I do think that some kind of a correction is imminent, no doubt. I mean, we could have a bit of a sell off in January before, going bigger in February, March into April, May kind of time frame. So I would say, look, there's more room to run. But if we think that it's just going to keep going up in a straight line, I think that's where we just need to be careful that, we're not like just going all in. Right now, there's bearish divergence on silver as well, as you would expect. As with the SPY, even ASML had some bearish divergence there. So when I talk even about ASML and I talk about silver, there's more room to potentially run. I do think we have to be wary. And sometimes, as you and I both know, Josh, there can be bearish divergence for days, weeks, even months. There could be triple and quadruple bearish divergences as something keeps going up. It doesn't mean that it's going to drop right away, but it doesn't mean that it's not. So I think there should just be a level of caution that when we see something that has run up so heavy after so long down, or something that's just run up so heavy and is at all-time highs like the SPY, that we should be making sure that we have a trade plan, that we protect those profits, and that we have money, more importantly, to either short and or buy the dips when they come.
All right. Last word is going to be on Netflix for my gal Chantel. She actually asked this question. Guys, thank you both for being here. Out of the 3 tickers mentioned recently, Disney, Iron, and Nike, which would be your choice for leaps? Also, if you have time, talk a little bit about Netflix. I don't know. I that's hard for me to answer. I like Disney's a pick for 2026. That's on the books. I got heat even in this video. People said that Disney was a joke. Mike, thumbs up. And Mike, don't hurt my feelings. You can hurt my feelings. Don't concern yourself with my feelings. Disney for 2026, up or down? Shoot me straight, brother.
I think the Disney chart looks fairly decent. You got higher highs and higher lows there. So I think out of those four stocks that you've shared, I think Disney chart looks the best out of them all. So I'm going to go Disney thumbs up, even though I'm not a buyer of Disney at this time. But I think the chart looks to be the strongest out of those charts right now. But there's also unknowns with Netflix. We don't know if that deal's going to go through or not. But based off what I see, strictly prices true in the
I don't
charts,
know,
Disney
Mark. If
looks best.
there's no way the deal won't go through. Nobody else has the money to bid. They're all broke liars. Now, but Donald Trump's got to do his thing. Larry Ellison's going to do his thing. They're going to do their thing together, and then they'll release the deal and it'll go through, and the stock's going to rip. I'm going to quickly show the Netflix chart, and I'm going to answer one more question here. So this is the fib, and we've come down to the 0.78 level, and this is one of the longest periods of time that the price has been beneath the 200-day moving average on the daily time frame. It's one of the longest periods of time. It's very rare for Netflix to be down here. But yet again, we bounced once, and now we've come back to this 0.78. We bounced again. Pretty nice wick on that. Pretty nice wick. I still believe that we are going to move back up here and test this level. So I'm just letting you guys know that this is, we don't have a very strong bounce yet. We've been more consolidating here. But I do think we have to come back a little bit and test this range before going lower. So I'm still optimistic on Netflix. Let me go one more thing. How's the SPY looking for next week? And I wanted to share this with you guys. Let me go and reference it. So this doesn't relate to the SPY, but it relates to the QQQ. A massive degenerate bull is going along with a big bet for next Monday, the 29th. He bought millions, sweeped the QQQ for Monday. And so he's long over the weekend. And that just means that, there's optimism still going into next week. The biggest takeaway is you can be a degen with him and ride over the weekend for a move higher. I still believe the market's positioned to go higher next week. But I definitely wouldn't jump on shorting the market and buying puts. I wouldn't have done that. So my answer is that it looks good to me. You can play the leveraged ETFs early in the morning on Monday. Mark, you do some live trading in the Stocks with Josh Discord. How are you doing? What do you got on the itinerary for next week?
Well, it's New Year's Day next week, so the market's shut on the in the Stocks with
So you're not
Josh
doing anything
trade
next week.
session.
That's
The
fine.
market's
That's fine.
closed.
That's fine. We all should be.
We could
we all
trade
should
crypto.
be-
We could probably trade. We could do a power hour of crypto, maybe. I don't know. Me and you can talk about that.
The problem with
But yeah,
crypto, I've been doing a little bit of trading, but it's just there's no liquidity in it, man. The no movements. I've been.
yeah, it's very choppy, sideways. Bitcoin's trading between 85 and 90, just liquidating longs and shorts, and unless you're sitting there waiting for those moments for when it moves between, you're kind of stuck in the middle. So it can be a challenging environment at the moment where there's a clear move to the upside or the downside. I mean, you can trade a ranging market, but a trending market can be easier to trend if you catch that trend. You can ride it all the way up or ride it all the way down. So yeah, I agree. It's very choppy.
Yeah, I got a question about an old subject. What happened to the Sui meme challenge? Will there ever be light again? That's been well answered back then in 2024 December. I killed it. I said liquidity dried up. We ran it hard for about 2 weeks, and it worked for about 9 to 10 of those trades did incredibly well, but the last two did poorly, and it's just because the market started selling off. And to be honest with you, that was the end of a lot of the altcoin movement. We have been bleeding
most
since
altcoins.
Yeah, altcoins, everything died, and I was right to call it. And I think there was an excitement about the idea of alts having their big move in 2025. but they didn't.
Didn't happen.
They didn't happen.
No, I
And
mean,
so,
most altcoins put in their all-time highs in December. And that's where we were trading all the meme coins because
yep,
liquidity was flowing. And then it finished
yep.
in December. And Solana was one of the last to put in its top. I think ETH is one of the few that's top came quite late, but not many other altcoins put their top in after January. Most altcoins, the majority of them topped in December and January and never ever recovered.
Sean Hazel says, historically, this is the best 6 months of the stock market upon us. Not in a midterm election year. So you got to keep in mind that there are scenarios that you have to look at. Historically, in a midterm election year, the market drops 20% and on average, which is pretty substantial. And when you consider that we've really had a great 2023, 2024, and 2025, there's a likelihood that we could even drop more. I'll be a heavy buyer this year, but I'm not thinking that the next 6 months. And also, I did that work for you guys on the SPY that we're 23% away from the moving average. We never get more than 23% away before we turn back and go home.
Yeah.
And so, it would have to be a catalyst that I don't see, not just the market's not going to go up on just good feelings at this point. I appreciate DB Walker said, 500 likes is not enough. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to leave it there, and we should all go back to enjoying our holiday week here. Thank you, Mark, for taking time away from charts and family to join the community and give some great guidance. I really do like what Mark is highlighting. Mark is fair. He's not over here saying for 100% it's going to go this way or that way. He's shared very valuable perspectives and brackets to our thinking. In truth, I used the 500-day theory to make money over the last 2 or 3 years, and I guarantee you, I'm going to be watching very closely at those time frames. But each of us has to have our own strategy. Mark believes that there's going to be an opportunity later, closer to October of 2026, for this maximum bottom low that could be anywhere between 60 and maybe even 40, where he's going to put his money to risk. I saw one of my guys in here said he's buying $200 of Bitcoin every day. Samuel Brown, he's taking an approach. He's taking a long view approach, kind of like myself.
Yeah,
but we'll definitely be popping on here and giving you guys our view of Bitcoin. Appreciate you guys. Peace and blessings. Hit that like on the way out. We'll see you in the next video. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you all. Enjoy your holiday.